Since I seem to have nothing but time on my hands, I'm going to vent my frustration into this page. I'm sitting in my home, which has now turned into my prison. I work as a lighthouse keeper off the peninsula of Wisconsin in Lake Michigan. I dropped out of college and found a listing on a government job listing and decided to get off my ass and work because all I was doing was sitting around reading books anyway. I got the gig and have been living here full-time for 8 years. I like it. I'm not a social person, and it's better than working the deep fryer at McDonald's. All I gotta do is make a light come on at night, and that's about it. My lighthouse is for a small island called Plum Island. It's between the mainland and a much larger island called Washington Island. Washington Island is around 130 square miles and pretty popular. There isn't much for entertainment in Wisconsin, so this is what we do in our spare time. There are 5 ferries that can fit around 20 to 30 cars that carry people to the island practically 24/7. Whatever dumbass decided to make the harbors line up so Plum Island is right in between them is beyond me, but it allows me to have this job. Plum Island is around 0.5 square miles and has 3 residents: me, myself, and I. This island is essentially a circle, but with a peninsula protruding from it, which is a higher spot where my humble abode resides. My lighthouse is pretty modern, directly connected to my mobile home. I don't mind it because my apartment before this was basically a bed shoved into a room smaller than a gas station bathroom. My job, if you can even call it that, is to make the light turn on at night and then stay on. I got basically no training and just got a multi-page training journal left by the last keeper. They died of a heart attack, and nobody knew until a few months after they died when the inspector came. They were rotting away in the bathtub, seemingly knowing they were going to die, but never radioed in for assistance. Even though I feel like I have no clue what I'm doing, I make that light turn on every night. Once or twice a year, an inspector comes and checks on everything to make sure nothing is faulty. Unless you call in an issue, you basically just get 1 visitor a year. I like the slow life, however. Every day I wake up and go for a run to the other side of the island. The lighthouse is on the highest point of the island, so the docks are on the opposite side along a nice walking trail through pine trees. It's only about a mile-long run to go there and back, but it's enough exercise to keep me in relatively good shape. Another one of my duties is to trim the pine trees so they don't overtake the walking trail. The forest is so thick that you can't see the lake when you are in the center, but the smell of the lake and the pine makes me feel like I'm camping with my family. It's calming.
About a month ago, things started to change. The peninsula has no trees, cut down purposely. It has a dirt path with roots taking it over, leading into the woods. I walked outside of my home to find a pine tree on its own, a good 50 feet out from the tree line, encroaching onto my yard. I stood there staring at it. The first thing I did was let out a confused chuckle. This tree was 100 feet tall and appeared overnight. I stood there for a good few minutes just looking at it. I decided to think about how to handle this while I ran. During my short run, I concluded I would just cut it down. I had a gas chainsaw for trimming up the trail, and I didn't really know how trees spread. I didn't want this new tree to grow more saplings and lose my front yard. I'm not stupid. However, I have no clue how that new tree just seemingly appeared overnight. But what am I supposed to do about it? Call the police? Hello, officer. I live on an island by myself and the trees are closing in. That's a fast track to losing this job. Once I got back, I walked over to inspect the tree to find it nowhere in sight. Now I didn't know what to think. I walked inside slightly too fast and slammed the door behind me. I went to my diary and pondered the situation, deeply considering if maybe I wasn't well, and if I was actually experiencing extreme withdrawals from not having human contact in a few months. I stayed inside all day spiraling about whether I needed to talk to someone. I remembered Rodney, the lighthouse inspector, was coming in next week, so I would wait and vent to him about it. When Rodney comes, he usually stays for a night or two. He's an older guy, my guess is around 60 years old. He has a few missing teeth, and whenever he comes, he tells stories of his life that are more interesting than my whole life combined. A few days pass and everything stays the same. No new trees, and the weather has been beautiful for Wisconsin standards. Instead of going for a morning run, I decided to go fishing in the morning. I have a small deep fryer, and I wanted to treat Rodney to something good when he stops by tomorrow. I caught a good few smallmouth bass, enough for a classic Wisconsin Friday fish fry. While hauling the bucket of fish back through the woods, I came across a familiar sight. Right in the middle of the trail, there was another pine tree. This one is way thicker and even bigger, standing at about 150 feet tall. I knew for a fact this wasn't here just a few mere hours ago. I doubled back frantically, checking if I somehow wasn't on the trail. Looking around just made me more paranoid. This was the trail, and when I really looked around and took in the woods, it looked much thicker than usual. I didn't know if it was because of my paranoia or if there were actually more trees than usual. I walked past the tree, never taking my eyes off it until I was a good 30 feet past it when my heart dropped. I backed into something, whipping around, and I saw another pine practically identical to the one I just passed.
My heart dropped and my legs froze. I couldn't look up. I felt as if I didn't look up at its immense size, it couldn't hurt me. As I was staring at my feet, I noticed something. A large ditch leading from the tree line to the tree in my path, as if it were dragged there by some immense force. My instincts kicked in and I chose flight, dropping everything in my hands and sprinting to the lighthouse. In hindsight, I should have run to the docks and taken a boat out of this hell, but it's too late now. As I emerged from the tree line, I saw that pine. The first one that moved was back in its original position, 50 feet away from the tree line, seemingly staring at me. I didn't slow down as I slammed the door behind me. I didn't dare look outside. I went straight to my diary to write down what I saw, which was my greatest comfort at the time. Writing things down forces you to slow down your mind to match your handwriting and lets you look back later and see what you really felt. Looking back at that diary were the writings of a madman. I would end sentences before they were finished and start writing if my best option was to go back to the mainland, call in and say what I saw. And even at one point, I debated taking my own life right then and there out of fear. The only thing that calmed me down was my alarm to turn the lighthouse on, snapping me back into routine, which was all I felt like I had left. Walking up the thin spiral staircase to the main room felt like a marathon. Looking back, I can't even remember what I was thinking during that climb. Once I got to the top to inspect the light before turning it on, like usual, I saw something that finally proved I wasn't crazy. At the top of the stairs, there was a shadow, a large, thick shadow coming from the sunset. Without even looking out the window, I knew what it was. A pine tree, trunk touching the window as if trying to look inside. I fell backwards down the hard metal stairs as if my body decided that was the quickest way to escape. I hit my head in a bad way and blood started to seep into my eyes, partially blinding me, and I descended and locked myself in the bathroom, the only room without windows. I stayed the night there, unable to sleep and trying my best to patch myself up with my shaky hands. I finally got the radio and called in for emergency assistance. If they didn't believe me about the trees, I didn't care. I could be crazy for all I know, but I needed to get off this island. I tried to radio in, but my worst fear came to fruition. Silence. That night I passed out in the bathtub, trying to keep my blood from staining the walls as if the trees would find me by following its trail. I awoke to a honk as I jolted out of the tub. I knew exactly what it was. Rodney, and his dinky little fishing boat was passing by the lighthouse on his way to the docks. I couldn't see him, but I recognized the horn from anywhere. Rodney does it every time he comes for inspections because the first time he showed up, I was still asleep, and he gave me the fright of my life barging in the front door. I was at a standstill. I had two choices: go to Rondi and escape this island, or wait for him and hope he can escort me in my manic, injured state back to the docks.
Looking back, I know I made the wrong choice, but I waited there like a coward, hoping Rondé would come and save me. 1 hour went by, then 2, then 3. I knew this was my chance, my moment. I could escape. I finally gathered up all the courage in my body and opened the door to my bathroom. I planned the route ahead of time. I was going to grab my running shoes, a backpack with medical supplies, and my journal, and make a break for the docks. I debated grabbing a chainsaw, but I didn't see a point in it. It would take me multiple minutes to cut down one of those monstrous trunks. I opened the door and only saw a small amount of sunlight peeking through the windows. I knew without even looking that there were more trees trying to surround me from all sides. I stood before the front door, readying myself for the run I've made every day for 8 years. I took a deep breath and opened the door and started running. The tree line was nowhere in sight. I was already in the forest when I opened the door. I didn't care about that, however. All I saw was a cosmically horrifying sight I will never forget. The trees weren't pine trees anymore. They were fleshy pillars reaching into the sky. The branches no longer had leaves, instead leaving fleshy tendrils the size of a water bottle hanging all the way to the ground. The tendrils were a mix of purple and yellow, with veins and the small hairs coating them like a man's unshaved stubble. The roots were a deep red, moving slowly, as if dancing to a slow melody, dipping in and out of the ground covered in suction cups like octopus tentacles. I only got a few steps out of the house before I saw Rodney. He was tied up in the hanging tendrils, a good 15 feet off the ground. His face was now twisted as if it had become a tree knot. His skin was half pale, the other half turning into this bright pink fleshy substance as if it were a horrible rash. My mind zeroes in on this sight, unable to move. Then the knot that was now his face started to contort and croaked in a slow, sad voice. "Help me, please." I turned around and sprinted back inside, hearing a loud scraping right on my heels, knowing it was the trees moving after me to turn me into whatever Rodney had become. I slammed the door behind me, pinching one of the purple and yellow tendrils right off in the doorway. The tendril wriggled for a bit, then ceased its movement. This has been my prison for the past 2 months. In a few more weeks, I will be out of food and water. I've come to terms with my situation. The trees seemingly won't break through the windows, but just sit right outside, observing me. They know I have no other choice but to leave eventually. So why bother breaking in when they can just wait for me to leave? Every once in a while, I hear Rodney's voice. Its sad, slow tone as if crying repeatedly is calling for help. Around a week ago, he stopped asking for help, and now is asking me to kill him. It seems both of us are at the end of our rope. Every day I sit at the top of the lighthouse, looking out onto the island, looking at the beautifully horrific scene.
The trees reach up into the sky past the clouds. Clouds which had been present ever since the day the trees changed. The trunks at ground level are multiple feet thick, but become as thin as rope, around 300 feet into the sky, reaching into the sky past the clouds, converging on a single point above the island, as if puppeteered by God. Tomorrow, if the water is calm enough, I'm going to dive into Lake Michigan and try to swim to the mainland. I'm not the best swimmer, but it's better than becoming whatever Rodney has become. I'm assuming the rest of the world isn't in any better of a state due to the radio silence, but I don't care. If I'm not allowed to live, I'll at least die the way I want.